Sometimes, a single evening has the power to transform a life. In the heart of a vibrant city, a glittering restaurant comes alive with soft music, elegant table settings, and waiters moving effortlessly between guests. Among them is one unsuspecting server, going about their evening, unaware that they're about to encounter a boastful billionaire who will challenge their talent in an unexpected way. What follows is a captivating test of skill, determination, and resilience that not only silences the loudest skeptics but leaves the entire room in awe. It's a story of opportunity, courage, and the surprising ways life can change in an instant. If this intriguing tale has piqued your interest, stay with us to uncover the twist you won't see coming. And for more stories that inspire and uplift, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Motivation for Success. Every story has the potential to change a life. This one might just change yours. It all started on a mild Saturday evening in a bustling district of Silverwood City. Tucked away between glossy skyscrapers and designer boutiques stood the Ivory Leaf, an upscale restaurant known for its refined decor and meticulously prepared dishes. Soft, amber lights glowed from overhead, illuminating the crisp white tablecloths and well-polished utensils. A baby grand piano sat in the corner, providing a subtle, melodic backdrop that calmed diners as they savored each course. The Ivory Leaf's clientele arrived dressed in fine suits and elegant gowns, the hush of quiet conversation mixing with delicate jazz notes, while the aroma of gourmet cooking floated in from the kitchen. Amid the carefully orchestrated hustle was a waitress named Felicia Arnett. She was 26, with intelligent eyes and a patience tempered by years of serving varied and often demanding patrons. Felicia had only been employed at the Ivory Leaf for 6 months, but she had already become a favorite among regulars and staff alike, thanks to her warm smile and calm demeanor. What most people didn't know was that Felicia possessed a remarkable gift. She was a deeply skilled pianist. Since childhood, music had been her solace and secret ambition, a dream she had tucked away out of practicality. You can't always chase passions when rent, bills, and everyday life clamor for attention. Yet every time she glanced at that gleaming piano in the corner, she remembered why she had taken this job in the first place. During short breaks, if the restaurant was quiet, Felicia would tiptoe over to the piano, run her fingers lightly across the keys, and let the hush of a half-played melody reignite her sense of possibility. Felicia's journey began far from the polished world of the Ivory Leaf. She had grown up in a small rural town named Glenwood, where her mother worked as a school librarian and her father spent his days at a local repair shop. They owned a chipped upright piano, a leftover relic from Felicia's grandfather, that resided in the corner of their living room. As a young girl, Felicia's fascination with the keys led her to spend countless hours figuring out tunes by ear and devouring borrowed sheet music. Even though formal lessons were out of reach financially, she discovered she could learn almost anything by reading books from the library and watching her mother's old educational tapes. By the time she turned 12, she was performing classical and contemporary pieces at community events, her entire town marveling at her self-taught prowess. However, as Felicia approached adulthood, finances took precedence. Dreams of attending a prestigious music conservatory vanished when her parents explained they couldn't afford expensive auditions, let alone tuition. Always the realist, Felicia set her aspirations on hold to work and support the family. She juggled part-time jobs, delivering groceries, bussing tables, while also setting aside small amounts of savings for the day she might pick up her musical ambitions again. Eventually, she moved to Silverwood City, lured by the possibility of better opportunities. While the Ivory Leaf was just another job on paper, its presence of a baby grand piano stirred hope that perhaps she could weave music back into her life. On that fateful Saturday evening, Felicia was carefully balancing plates of delicate appetizers, weaving through tables where couples celebrated anniversaries and colleagues toasted business triumphs. Her natural grace made her tasks appear effortless, so much so that first-time diners often marveled at her composure under stress. That night, the restaurant hummed with even more excitement than usual, for a rumored VIP booking had caused a flurry of activity in the reservations log. Even the maitre d', normally unflappable, looked a little on edge. Around 8:30, the front doors swung open to admit a tall man in a tailored suit with an entourage of equally well-dressed associates. This was Coleman Vaughn, an affluent investor whose name was whispered in many top circles for his ability to make or break businesses with a snap of his fingers. At only 38, he had accumulated staggering wealth, some said through cunning deals and intimidation tactics. Vaughn's face was regularly splashed across financial magazines, always with a triumphant grin that hinted at the power he wielded. Wherever he went, he carried an air of spectacle, talking just loudly enough to draw attention to himself, glancing around with the entitlement of someone used to being the most important person in the room. Felicia had heard rumors about Vaughn but had never encountered him until that night. As soon as he entered, the hush of the dining room grew pronounced. Waitstaff stood a little taller, kitchen workers peeked through the doors, and the manager personally guided Vaughn's party to a prime table near the center of the restaurant. Vaughn's companions seemed eager to impress him, hanging on his every word with polite laughter at his jokes. Felicia watched from a distance, calmly finishing up with another table before collecting her notepad and heading over to greet the new guests. The manager asked if she would mind taking Vaughn's party. Felicia had no qualms. Difficult customers were a part of the job, though she suspected he might be especially demanding. She stepped up to the table, offered a courteous smile, and introduced herself, waiting to see how he'd respond. Vaughn barely made eye contact, flicking his gaze up and down as though appraising her in less than a second. He then placed an elaborate drink order that included specific instructions about the garnish, the ice, and the glass. His associates followed suit. Felicia jotted everything down with steady composure, ignoring Vaughn's faint smirk. While Felicia headed back to the kitchen to relay the order, Vaughn's voice carried behind her, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear, "They call this place top tier, but I've yet to see anything that really impresses me. Let's see if anyone here can rise above mediocre." A few customers glanced over in irritation, but Vaughn seemed unfazed, soaking up the attention. As the evening progressed, Felicia returned repeatedly to Vaughn's table, delivering appetizers, topping up water glasses, and patiently fielding comments he directed her way. Each exchange felt like a test. Vaughn tossed out criticisms of the decor, the service, even the arrangement of the table. Felicia, trained to maintain calm under pressure, found herself pushing aside a growing sense of unease. Something about Vaughn's stare made her skin prickle. Eventually, the conversation at Vaughn's table turned to the background music. One of his associates made an offhand remark about the piano, praising how elegantly it paired with the meal. Vaughn, never missing a chance to stir the pot, let his gaze roam the dining area before it settled squarely on Felicia, who was approaching with a bottle of wine. He leaned back and said, "That piano's collecting dust in the corner. Shame no one here seems capable of playing something worthwhile." Felicia felt a slight hitch in her breath. Her mind raced with conflicting urges, to keep quiet and remain professional, or to mention she could play. She quickly decided on the former. This wasn't the moment to make a scene. But Vaughn, perhaps sensing her hesitation, pressed the issue. "You there, Felicia, right?" His voice carried across several tables, causing them to pause their meals. "You've been floating around this place all night. Any chance you can do more than carry plates?" She froze momentarily, scanning the room to see a few onlookers turn toward her. The manager hovered at the bar, apparently uncertain whether to intervene or let Felicia handle the situation. She cleared her throat and offered a polite, "Sir, my main role is to serve the tables." She hoped that would be enough, but Vaughn wasn't satisfied. He raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's too bad. Some light entertainment might liven up this place. Don't you think?" He directed the question to his associates, who chuckled in agreement. A pit formed in Felicia's stomach. She wanted to slip away discreetly, but Vaughn's confrontational tone had pinned her in place. I can play a little," she finally admitted, trying to sound casual. She wasn't proud or boastful about her skills, but she also couldn't bring herself to flat-out lie. The second she uttered the words, Vaughn's eyes lit up, as though he had caught a fish on a line. "Is that so?" he drawled. His voice dropped, yet it carried an edge of challenge. "Prove it. I'm curious to see if there's talent worth noting in this fancy place." Felicia's heart hammered. This was exactly the scenario she had never wanted: center stage, put on the spot by a man whose approval she couldn't care less about. But the restaurant had gone eerily silent. People waited to see if she would answer the challenge. Encouragement flickered in the eyes of a few fellow servers, but they, too, remained quiet, unsure if stepping in would worsen the situation. Steeling herself, Felicia straightened her posture. She refused to let Vaughn reduce her to a spectacle, but a simmering determination rose within her. If her years of practice had taught her anything, it was that she could speak through the piano far better than she could speak with words. In that moment, she remembered the chipped upright from her childhood, the countless nights spent memorizing music by candlelight, and the pride on her mother's face during those rare community recitals. "All right," she said, forcing an even tone. "But just one piece. Then I need to get back to my duties." Vaughn smirked. "Fair enough. Show me what you've got." Felicia turned toward the corner, weaving through the tables that had grown silent in curiosity. The baby grand piano gleamed under the delicate glow of overhead lights. Her mind buzzed with anxiety, but also with a spark of anticipation. She settled onto the bench, took a deep breath, and let her fingers rest lightly on the keys. For a fleeting moment, she closed her eyes, recentering herself in the memories of home, of that upright piano and her mother's gentle encouragement. With a soft press of the keys, the first notes floated into the air. She chose a piece that suited the ambience, a classical composition with melodic undertones and a touch of modern flair, something that felt simultaneously soothing and stirring. As the music poured out, Felicia found herself forgetting about Vaughn, about the other diners, even about her co-workers. She sank into the melody, hands moving with practiced confidence, building a tapestry of sound that swelled and receded like an ocean tide. The hush that fell over the ivory leaf spoke more loudly than words. Even servers paused their tasks, trays in hand, transfixed by the sound Felicia coaxed from the piano. It was as though all the day's tension dissolved into a single hush of expectancy. Listening to her play, one would never guess. She was merely a waitress at an upscale restaurant. In that moment, she appeared every bit the accomplished musician. When her piece reached its gentle conclusion, a breathless hush lingered before the crowd exploded into applause. Nearby diners cheered, some standing to express their admiration more enthusiastically. Felicia, flushed and breathless, exhaled in relief. She offered a timid smile, the satisfaction of reclaiming her identity surging inside her. Maybe that was the real reason she ended up at the Ivory Leaf, to remember the musician she always was. Vaughn's reaction was less effusive, though he did clap slowly, a calculated gesture meant to appear courteous. His expression was inscrutable, an unreadable blend of mild surprise and reluctant respect. For a moment, Felicia half expected a negative remark, some witty put-down to reassert his authority. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "That's quite something. You don't see that every day." There were no jokes or digs to follow. The hush in the room had turned from expectant to tense, everyone wondering if Vaughn's next words would be harsh or conceding. Ultimately, he seemed at a loss. His associates stole glances at him, unsure whether to join in praising Felicia or remain loyal to their leader's lukewarm demeanor. Felicia didn't await further commentary. She stood, placing one hand on the piano's glossy surface as if to thank it, then gave a small nod to the onlookers who had applauded. Her shift awaited, and she had no intention of stretching the spectacle. As she made her way past Vaughn's table, he looked at her with an expression that bordered on discomfort. Perhaps he realized he had set out to prove her incompetent but had inadvertently spotlighted her immense talent. The rest of the night took on a surreal quality. Word spread quickly among diners, and each table Felicia served greeted her with compliments and questions. How long have you been playing? Where did you learn? Do you plan to perform professionally? She answered them all politely, her humility shining through. The Ivory Leaf's manager discreetly congratulated her, hinting that perhaps on slower nights, they'd let her play a set if she was willing. Even her co-workers, who had grown used to seeing Felicia's quiet demeanor, were newly awed by the artistry she had just revealed. Vaughn, meanwhile, completed his meal in an unusually subdued manner. Gone was the dominating voice proclaiming judgments about the restaurant's decor or the food's presentation. Instead, he seemed to retreat into his own thoughts, poking half-heartedly at the final course that arrived at his table. When Felicia went to clear his plates, he offered no snide remarks, only a quick nod. Was it begrudging respect, or residual awkwardness at having been shown up? Perhaps a bit of both. As Vaughn and his companions prepared to leave, he paused near the door. An odd tension filled the space as though he were weighing whether to offer a parting shot or an olive branch. With a short exhale, he glanced over at Felicia, who was in the middle of discussing a dessert option with another table. He lifted his hand in a tiny wave of acknowledgement, almost apologetic, before stepping into the night with his entourage in tow. Felicia noticed, but made no reaction, her focus remained on the guests in front of her. In the days that followed, Felicia's mini-performance became an oft-told anecdote. Diners who had been present relayed the story to friends and colleagues, the bold, wealthy patron who challenged a shy waitress to prove her skill only to be overshadowed by her breathtaking talent. Overnight, Felicia went from being one of many competent staff members at the Ivory Leaf to a local point of interest. Some people reached out, offering to connect her with local music venues or small bands. Others simply dropped by to hear her play again, hoping to witness the same magic. Beyond the external attention, a shift also happened inside Felicia. She had spent so long burying her passion under financial responsibilities and fear of disappointment that she had almost forgotten the sense of unity that came with playing the piano. Performing for that demanding crowd, and winning them over, reignited a flame in her. It wasn't about making Vaughn look foolish, it was about proving to herself that she still had the capacity to be the musician she had once dreamed of becoming. One afternoon, the restaurant's manager approached her. He mentioned how impressed the entire staff had been and proposed an idea: maybe you can do short sets during the quieter evenings. We'll compensate you for the extra time, of course. Felicia blinked in surprise. This was an unexpected but thrilling offer. She wouldn't have to choose between waitressing and playing piano, she could do both. She accepted with a thankful smile, already imagining what pieces she could prepare. Her first official performance at the Ivory Leaf was scheduled for a Wednesday night, typically slower but with a stable crowd of regulars. Word spread quickly among the staff, and many made a point to come in during their off hours to hear her. Felicia arrived early, nerves fluttering in her stomach like birds, but also brimming with excitement. That evening, she wore a simple black dress rather than her uniform, taking on a new role as both server and entertainer. When she took her seat at the Baby Grand, a hush settled over the guests, many of whom recognized her from the impromptu show days earlier. She began with a slow, melancholic piece that eased the tension, then transitioned into a jazzier tune that had toes tapping under tables. Between each song, she paused only long enough to catch her breath before plunging into the next. Applause sprinkled the air throughout, warm and genuine, reassuring her that she was on the right path. Halfway through the set, Felicia's eyes spotted a figure entering the restaurant alone. Curiously, it was Coleman Vaughn. He looked around, noticed her at the piano, and hesitated. She continued playing, not letting it disrupt her performance, but a faint knot of anxiety swirled inside her. Vaughn quietly slid into a corner table, far from the center of attention, ordered a drink, and listened. This time, there were no arrogant declarations, no clinks of ice meant to distract. He simply watched her fingers dance across the keys. After she finished her final song, guests stood in a wave of applause. Felicia bowed her head in thanks, her cheeks flushed with gratitude. She gathered her sheet music, stepping away from the piano to greet those who approached. A few minutes later, one of her co-workers tapped her on the shoulder and whispered that Vaughn had asked to speak to her if she had a moment. Felicia's heart thumped. She wasn't sure if she wanted to hear another backhanded compliment or ambiguous remark. Still, she nodded, took a breath to steady herself, and walked over to where Vaughn sat. He looked different, less imposing, somehow. His face carried a reflection of humility she hadn't seen before. Standing next to his table, Felicia offered a measured, polite smile. Vaughn leaned forward, speaking quietly. "I just wanted to tell you," he paused. "The other night, I was out of line. What you did on that piano was more than I expected." Felicia simply nodded, uncertain if he was apologizing or merely acknowledging her skill. He added, "You're the real deal. Don't let folks like me get in your way." Part of her bristled, remembering how he had cornered her into playing so he could turn her into a spectacle. But the other part of her recognized the subtle remorse that laced his words. In her mind, she decided that perhaps even the most arrogant among us can learn a lesson or two when confronted with genuine talent and sincerity. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate that." She didn't dwell any further, quickly returning to her staff duties. Vaughn lingered for a while, finishing his drink in silence, and left soon after without making another scene. In the weeks that followed, Felicia's life changed in small but meaningful ways. She began performing at the Ivory Leaf a couple of nights a week, sometimes slipping in an original composition among her set list. Patrons, from regular locals to traveling executives, praised her unique style. A local arts blogger did a short piece about the hidden pianist of the Ivory Leaf, spurring more curious visitors to dine there in hopes of catching Felicia's performance. The tip jar overflowed those nights, and she started setting aside that extra money for potential music classes or even a private instructor who could refine her skills further. But beyond the financial or social boosts, the biggest shift was internal. She felt validated. More than that, she felt free. Over the years, life's challenges had made her doubt her place in the music world, but now she saw that her journey wasn't over just because it had been delayed. She realized she could carve out a space for music in her life without giving up her obligations. Curiously, Coleman Vaughn visited once more, this time with far less fanfare. He chose a quiet corner to dine and listened attentively to Felicia's set. When she approached his table after performing, he offered a genuine smile and said, "Sometimes, the most extraordinary things appear in the most unexpected places." If he had intended to pass along wisdom, Felicia accepted it with grace. Perhaps it was a small redemption arc for him, a reminder that genuine artistry can pierce through the toughest egos. She no longer harbored bitterness. If anything, his challenge had unlocked her drive and reminded her of what she was capable of. As word of Felicia's performances traveled, she was invited to collaborate with a small ensemble that played at local charitable events. This arrangement allowed her not only to showcase her talent but also to contribute positively to the community. One day, she found herself performing a benefit concert for underprivileged kids who dreamed of learning music. Staring into the bright, curious faces in the audience, Felicia recalled her own younger self, practicing on that battered upright piano in Glenwood. Perhaps her playing might ignite the same flicker of hope in one of them. Time taught her more lessons, that adversity can be a catalyst for growth, that a single act of courage can unravel unexpected opportunities, and that sometimes, the harshest critics can become unlikely supporters. Above all, Felicia learned that speaking through her music could transcend any barrier, from financial limitations to external judgments. Now, each time she sits at the piano, whether at the Ivory Leaf or a local venue, she carries with her the memory of that night, when she stood up to someone who tried to trivialize her, faced her fears, and soared on the wings of her melodies. The moral of her story is simple yet profound: refusing to remain invisible, even when someone tries to make you small, can reshape your destiny. Sometimes, you just have to let your passion sing louder than another person's ridicule. So, friend, what about you? Is there a hidden talent or a suppressed dream you're scared to reveal because of possible judgment or failure? Felicia's journey reminds us all that we might be one brave moment away from uncovering our fullest potential. Don't wait for someone like Coleman Vaughn to challenge you, challenge yourself. Take that next step, share your voice, and stand up for your worth. And before you head off, remember to spread this message: if Felicia's resilience stirred something in you, consider passing it along. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of our strengths, our passions, and the unstoppable power of authenticity. After all, if this story moved you, consider spreading kindness today. You never know whose life you'll change, or maybe even your own.